Hi, I'm Serene Brooks with Goal Nutrition and Diabetes Specialty, and I'm here today to talk to you about the glycemic index and how it impacts blood glucose. Now, you hear about the glycemic index. Maybe you're wondering what that even means or why is it important for you and your blood sugar management? And it's one of the concepts I really feel is important for people who are managing insulin to understand. And it gets easier over time to recognize what foods impact blood sugar more than others. And it's different for everybody. So as I go through the things today, please think about how it impacts you and how certain foods impact your blood sugars, because they're going to be different for you than someone else, and they may be different than even what would be expected to happen when someone ate that food. So it's always important to identify how food impacts blood sugar so you can make decisions on insulin dosing and timing. Um, Now, back to the glycemic index. Glycemic index is essentially a number that is assigned to foods that contain a carbohydrate. And that number indicates how quickly the food you eat will raise blood sugar levels. So the higher the number, the higher the glycemic index of that food. And I'll give you a few examples as we go along, but I'm sure you have all had different foods that impact your blood sugar really quickly. And maybe you dose your insulin the very best you can, but no matter what you do, every time you eat that food, blood sugars tend to spike up after you eat them. Or maybe you have not ever really learned um, enough about the timing of insulin to understand what to do with that information. So those would all be things that would be important for you to understand for your own personal diabetes and management. So here are some things to know about the glycemic index that I hope will help you to better manage blood sugars. So first of all, low glycemic index foods are going to release glucose slowly and more steadily. So when you eat that food, you will notice the absorption rate is pretty steady. You'll have a little increase in blood sugars, and then they'll kind of come back down, but pretty easy to manage, and they don't raise your blood sugars quickly. Now, a lower glycemic index can help foster weight loss. So if you're trying to lose weight, a lower glycemic index food may be beneficial. It may be easier with weight loss because it does absorb slowly and insulin management is easier. And a lot of times the type of foods that tend to be lower glycemic index are also tend to be those that would contain higher nutrition, but not always. So we'll talk about that too. And it contributes to a better post-meal glucose if you eat a lower glycemic index food. High glycemic index foods then just do the opposite, right? They release glucose quickly, so you see a quick spike in blood glucose after eating them, but they do have some benefits, and one of them is they do help with a quicker recovery following exercise, especially long endurance or high intensity exercise where you need a quick recovery. A high glycemic index food is going to do that because it's going to release that glucose quickly, which is what your body is needing for energy. So it doesn't mean they're bad, right? There's some good things about high glycemic index foods. And another one that has probably come to your mind already is this is the kind of food you would choose in order to treat a low blood sugar. You want something quick that's going to go in, get your blood sugars up quickly. A high glycemic index food is going to do that. So you probably already have in mind what foods do that for you, right? There's lists available that you can find that talk about the high glycemic index foods, low glycemic index foods. But when you look at those, pay attention to which ones don't fall in the same category as what's listed or how they impact you. Because you're going to always find some that are in the low end that when you eat them, absorb quickly and they're more like high for you. So identify those things if you ever are looking at lists or look up the number of a high or low glycemic index food. Now, they are identified by number, so 0 to 100, and 0 to 55 would be considered low. And then there's a moderate level, which is 56 to 69, and then 70 to 100 would be considered a high glycemic index food. So that's kind of good to understand, like I said, what these foods are, how they impact you. Now, when it comes to meal planning, there's some things you can do to help keep in mind to help you with the overall impact that the food you're eating might have on blood sugars. Maybe you have got a meal where you're going to look over the different carbohydrates that you have selected, and some of them are higher, some of them are lower, some are moderate. Take a good look at just the overall glycemic index of that food. Like, how is this whole meal overall going to impact my blood sugars? What is the overall composition, and how does this impact my insulin timing? And this is one of the big points I guess I want to make as you're looking at the glycemic index of the food you eat. How is it impacting when you should take your insulin? And what are my current blood sugars right now? Because those are the two factors that will help you determine when to take your insulin. So if you are eating a high glycemic index food, you really need to be aware of where your current blood sugars are and what way they're trending, as opposed to a lower glycemic index food. So really important concept to consider as you are looking at the type of foods that you're about to eat. Now, be as accurate as you possibly can when counting your carbohydrates, regardless of how they impact your blood sugar. It's still important to really be sure that you're counting as accurately as possible. Now, a low glycemic index does not necessarily mean low calorie or low carb. It just means that it's going to impact your blood sugars not as quickly. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to calories. Pay attention to portion size, regardless of how quickly it's going to raise your blood sugar. Now, generally speaking, a high glycemic index food tends to come from more processed foods. So an example of that would be if you were going to eat a whole apple compared to a cup of apple juice, which one would be higher in the glycemic index, do you think? The fruit juice would raise your blood sugars much more quickly than eating the whole apple for most everybody. The whole apple is going to have some fiber. You've got the whole apple there, so you've got the peel, and you've just got a lot more substance to it. Where if you drink a cup of apple juice, it's probably taken, I don't know, maybe 3 apples to even make that cup of apple juice, and you don't have any of the other things to go with it. So you're getting way higher concentration and missing the other things like the fiber to help slow things down. So typically, more processed is higher on the glycemic index. Now, interestingly, cooking can impact the glycemic index of food. So pasta that has not been cooked all the way can be a little bit lower on the glycemic index than a fully cooked pasta. So that is another thing to know and pay attention. And also fruit. Fruit, as it ripens, will impact blood sugars more quickly than fruit that isn't quite as ripened. Now, also, sometimes the same class of food will differ with varying types. So if you were to eat some white rice compared to brown rice is going to impact blood sugars a little more slowly and also contain different nutrients as well. So it's a good one to add to your menu if you're wanting something that impacts blood sugar a little bit less and has a little more fiber, but you really like rice. That's a good one to swap out. And then Also, choose a variety of food that will add nutritional value to your meal. So, if you like some of these foods we're talking about that maybe impact blood sugars a little more quickly, try adding some other things along with it. Add some high fiber, some lean protein to help compensate for some of the other foods that you're choosing, and hope that you can figure out kind of how to balance the types of food you're eating so you're getting well balanced meals and you're getting a variety of nutrition. Now, high glycemic index foods do not need to be avoided. They aren't, I don't want them to be negative or sound bad. They just impact blood sugars differently. And so it's really important to know how they impact you because you are unique and different to everyone else. And then learn the best way to manage your blood sugars and your insulin dosing with knowing how that food is going to impact you. And this is a really helpful part of helping those post meal blood glucose levels.